August 15, 1945. The Philippine Islands. Dawn breaks over the liberated internment camp at Santo Tomas, Manila. The morning air hangs heavy with tropical moisture, carrying the acrid smell of burnt rubber from the retreating Japanese convoys and the sweet scent of sampagurta flowers that somehow survived 3 years of occupation. In a makeshift medical tent, canvas walls flutter against bamboo poles as 23 young women sit in absolute silence, their eyes fixed on the ground, hands folded precisely in their laps. They wear torn yucatas, the cotton fabric stained with sweat and fear, waiting for what they believe will be their execution. An American medic enters, his boots creating soft impressions in the dirt floor. He kneels before the first woman, extends a chocolate bar wrapped in olive drab paper, and speaks a single word that will shatter their entire understanding of the world. Sister. The liberation of the Philippines had revealed horrors that even battle-hardened soldiers struggled to comprehend. Among the most haunting discoveries were the comfort stations, euphemistic term that masked one of the war's most systematic atrocities. These facilities, scattered throughout the Japanese-occupied territories, housed women and girls forced into sexual slavery for the Imperial Japanese Army. Conservative estimates suggest that between 50,000 and 200,000 women, primarily from Korea, China, the Philippines, Indonesia, and other occupied territories, were enslaved in this system. The women discovered at Santo Tomas represented merely a fraction of this vast network of human suffering. Yet their encounter with American forces would become a defining moment in understanding the fundamental differences between the ideologies that had clashed across the Pacific. The comfort women system had been methodically organized by the Japanese military leadership following the rape of Nanking in 1937, where widespread sexual violence by Japanese soldiers had created international outrage and threatened military discipline. The solution, as conceived by the Imperial Command, was characteristically systematic: the establishment of regulated brothels staffed by women acquired through deception, coercion, or outright abduction. Military documents later discovered in Japanese archives reveal the cold bureaucracy behind this system. Requisition orders for military supplies included specifications for women, age ranges between 14 and 25, physical health requirements, and racial categories that reflected the hierarchy of the Greater East Asia Prosperity sphere. Korean women were particularly targeted, with approximately 80% of comfort women being of Korean origin, taken from families who were told their daughters would work in factories or hospitals supporting the war effort. The chocolate bar, that simple rectangular block wrapped in wax paper, would become the recurring symbol of an incomprehensible kindness. For these women, food had been a weapon of control. Japanese military regulations specified exact caloric allotments for comfort women: 390 grams of rice per day, supplemented by whatever vegetables could be locally procured. This was less than what was allocated to military horses. The chocolate represented not just sustenance but abundance. Not just sweetness, but the possibility that suffering might not be the only currency of human interaction. As the medic moved from woman to woman, offering the same gift, speaking the same words, sister, the chocolate bars accumulated untouched in trembling hands, their recipients unable to reconcile this gesture. With 3 years of systematic dehumanization, the Japanese soldiers who had overseen these facilities possessed their own complex relationship with the system they perpetuated. Many had arrived at their posts believing the official propaganda that comfort women were volunteers, patriots contributing to the imperial cause through their sacrifice. Lieutenant Yamada Ikairo, whose diary was recovered after the war, wrote in 1943, "The comfort women sing military songs with us and speak of their pride in serving the emperor. They understand their role in maintaining the purity and fighting spirit of the imperial forces." This fiction was carefully maintained through strict protocols. Women were given Japanese names, forced to speak Japanese, and required to bow to the portrait of Emperor Hirohito that hung in every comfort station. The elaborate pretense served to shield the perpetrators from the reality of their participation in mass rape, allowing them to believe they were engaging with willing participants in a patriotic enterprise. The truth, documented in testimonies collected by the Allied War Crimes Commission, painted a starkly different picture. Kim Hk-sun, who would later become one of the first comfort women to speak publicly about her experiences, described her first day at a comfort station in China. "I was 17. They told my parents I would work in a factory. Instead, I was locked in a room 2 meters by 2 meters. The first day, 7 soldiers came. I fought until they broke my arm. After that, I learned that resistance only made things worse. The systematic nature of the violence was reflected in the medical records kept by Japanese military doctors. These documents, discovered in 1992 in the Japanese Defense Agency's library, detail mandatory weekly examinations, treatments for venereal diseases, and procedures for managing pregnancies, all recorded with the same clinical detachment used for equipment maintenance logs. The American soldiers who liberated these women carried their own cultural framework, one shaped by different ideologies about femininity, protection, and human dignity. Private First Class Robert Mackenzie, part of the first unit to enter the Santo Tomas compound, later testified before Congress. We'd been briefed about potential civilian casualties, about prisoners of war, about booby traps. Nobody prepared us for those girls. They looked at us like we were death incarnate. When Sergeant Williams tried to give one of them water, she fell to her knees and started unbuttoning her shirt. That's when we understood what they thought was happening. The American military's immediate response reflected institutional values that, while imperfect and often contradicted in practice, nevertheless established protection of civilians as a fundamental principle. Within hours of discovery, military police cordoned off the area, medics were dispatched, and female nurses were urgently requested from rear positions. The chocolate bars began to disappear not through consumption, but through careful concealment. The women slipped them into hidden pockets, tucked them under sleeping mats, cradled them like talismans against an uncertain future. This hoarding behavior, observed by American medical personnel, spoke to years of conditioning where any resource could become currency for survival. Dr. Margaret Foster, one of the first female physicians to treat the liberated comfort women, noted in her medical reports, patient displays extreme resource guarding behavior, refused to eat provided chocolate ration, instead wrapping it in cloth torn from her garment. When assured more food was available, patient began crying and repeated Japanese phrase later translated as, "Tricks always have prices." The chocolate, intended as comfort, had become another source of anxiety in minds trained to expect cruelty disguised as kindness. The linguistic moment when American soldiers began calling these women sisters represented a profound collision of worldviews. In the Japanese military's terminology, comfort women were referred to as yanfu, a term that literally translates to comfort women, but carries connotations of sexual availability and subordination. Military documents used even more dehumanizing terminology: military supplies, sanitary utilities, or simply P, derived from the English word prostitute. The American usage of sister was not official policy, but rather an organic response from young soldiers who, confronted with evidence of systematized rape, reached for language that restored humanity. Sergeant James Williams, whose unit was responsible for the initial care of the liberated women, later explained, "My mama raised me to respect women. These girls, they weren't much older than my kid sister back in Iowa. What else were we supposed to call them? What those bastards did to them didn't change who they were." Statistical analysis of comfort station records, conducted post-war by Allied investigators, revealed the industrial scale of sexual violence. The average comfort woman was forced to service between 20 and 30 soldiers per day, with numbers increasing to 50 or more during military offensives when troops were rotated to the front lines. The Buruma Comfort Station in the Philippines, operational from 1942 to 1945, processed an estimated 300,000 visits by Japanese military personnel serviced by a rotating population of approximately 100 women. These numbers, stark in their inhumanity, were recorded with the same precision used for ammunition expenditure or fuel consumption, reflecting a worldview where human suffering could be quantified and managed like any other military resource. The transformation in the comfort women's perception of their liberators occurred gradually, measured in small gestures that defied their experiential framework. When Private David Kim, a Korean-American soldier serving as a translator, spoke to them in Korean, several women reportedly fainted from shock. Kim's report describes the encounter. They couldn't believe an American soldier was speaking their language. One elderly woman, she couldn't have been more than 25, but looked 50, grabbed my hand and asked if Korea still existed. The Japanese had told them Korea had been absorbed into Japan forever, that their families had forgotten them, that they had no nation to return to. This moment of linguistic recognition became the first crack in 3 years of systematic psychological manipulation. The chocolate bars accumulated into small pyramids beside sleeping mats, untouched but carefully arranged. Navy Corpsman Michael O'Brien documented this phenomenon. They treated those Hershey bars like religious artifacts. One girl had arranged 12 of them in a perfect square, measuring the distances between each one with a piece of string. When I tried to show her how to open the wrapper, she pulled back like I was about to take it away. It took 3 days before any of them actually ate one. And when they did, it was in tiny, careful bites, savoring each morsel like it might be the last sweet thing they'd ever taste. This behavior reflected not just starvation, but a deeper psychological scarring where pleasure itself had become dangerous, associated with letting down one's guard. The medical examinations conducted by American forces revealed the physical toll of systematic rape. Dr. Foster's reports, declassified in 1995, describe injuries consistent with repeated sexual violence, scarring, chronic infections, malnutrition, and in several cases, evidence of forced sterilization. One 19-year-old Filipina, identified in records only as patient 12, had endured such severe internal injuries that she required immediate surgery. The medical team discovered she had been pregnant 5 times in 3 years, each pregnancy forcibly terminated by Japanese medical personnel who viewed reproduction as an impediment to the women's utility. Yet even in the midst of these examinations, conducted with clinical necessity, the American medical personnel's approach differed markedly from what these women had experienced. Nurses held their hands, doctors explained procedures before performing them, and consent, a concept that had been absent for years, was repeatedly requested and confirmed. The Japanese military's documentation of the Comfort Women system, intended to demonstrate administrative efficiency, ultimately became evidence of war crimes. Order number 1466, issued by the Japanese War Ministry in 1938, outlined the establishment of comfort stations as essential for maintaining military discipline and preventing anti-Japanese sentiment arising from sexual crimes. The document's language reveals the fundamental contradiction at the system's core, acknowledging that rape by soldiers would create resistance while institutionalizing rape as official policy. Colonel Nakamura Hisao, who oversaw comfort station operations in the Philippines, wrote in his operational reports, "The Comfort Women's system prevents the 300,000 violations that would otherwise occur, channeling natural urges into controlled venues that maintain unit cohesion." This arithmetic of atrocity, the calculation that organized rape of thousands was preferable to the disorganized rape of hundreds of thousands, exemplified the moral calculus of totalitarian military ideology. The American soldiers' initial attempts at comfort often misunderstood the depth of trauma they were witnessing. Well-meaning efforts to provide entertainment, showing movies, playing music, organizing social gatherings, met with responses that puzzled and disturbed the liberators. When the 1st Cavalry Division's entertainment unit attempted to screen a Hollywood film for liberated civilians, including comfort women, the women fled at the first romantic scene. Chaplain Thomas Murphy recorded, "They ran from the tent like it was on fire. We found them hiding in the medical station, some of them scratching at their own skin until they bled." The translator explained that any display of affection triggered memories of what preceded violence in the comfort stations, the forced courtesy, the pretense of romance that some officers demanded before assault. The chocolate bars began to serve an unexpected purpose. Women started breaking them into tiny pieces, sharing them with each other in elaborate ceremonies that mystified American observers. Anthropologist Dr. Ruth Tanaka, brought in by military intelligence to help understand the liberated women's behavior, interpreted these rituals, their reclaiming agency, through the distribution of resources. For years, everything they had, food, clothing, their own bodies, was controlled and distributed by others. The chocolate ceremonies allow them to practice generosity, to choose giving rather than having gifts forced upon them. It's a form of psychological rehabilitation through material culture. The simple Hershey bar had become a medium for recovering human dignity. The testimonies collected from comfort women in the immediate aftermath of liberation reveal the cognitive dissonance created by American treatment. Pak Young Sim, 22 years old at liberation, later testified, "When the American soldier called me sister, I thought my Japanese wasn't good enough to understand. I asked the translator to repeat it 3 times. Sister, sister, sister. In the comfort station, we weren't allowed to use our real names. only Japanese flower names.
I was Sakura. To be called sister meant I was human again, that I belonged to a family.
Even if that family was gone, this linguistic recognition operated as a form of psychological restoration, acknowledging kinship and humanity in place of objectification and utility. The discovery of the comfort women forced American military authorities to confront the limits of their own moral framework. While official policy emphasized protection and medical care, individual soldiers' reactions ranged from compassion to disgust to uncomfortable desire.
Military police reports from September 1945 document several incidents where American soldiers attempted to purchase sexual services from liberated comfort women, not understanding or choosing to ignore their status as victims of sexual slavery. These incidents led to immediate policy clarifications.
General Douglas MacArthur issued General Order 303, stating, "Any member of Allied forces engaging in sexual contact with liberated comfort women will be subject to court-martial for rape, regardless of perceived consent."
As these individuals are recognized as victims of war crimes, incapable of genuine consent due to sustained trauma and coercion. The
chocolate bar economy that emerged in the liberation camps
reflected broader patterns of American abundance confronting Asian scarcity. By October 1945, the U.S. military was distributing approximately 50,000 chocolate bars per month to liberated civilian populations in the Philippines alone.
This industrial-scale generosity made possible by American production capacity that had manufactured 3 billion rationed chocolate bars during the war stood in stark contrast to the Japanese military's resource allocation.
A captured Japanese quartermaster document from 1944 showed that comfort stations received 0.3% of the food resources allocated to military units they served, forcing women to survive on scraps and the occasional gifts from officers who demanded special services.
The chocolate bar, mass-produced in Hershey, Pennsylvania, by workers earning union wages, became an artifact of democratic industrial capacity meeting totalitarian deprivation. The medical treatment
provided to comfort women by American forces extended beyond physical healing to include unprecedented psychiatric care. Captain Abraham Rosen, a psychiatrist assigned to the liberation forces, pioneered treatment approaches for what would later be recognized as complex post-traumatic stress disorder. His notes describe innovative therapies. Patient exhibits selective mutism, except when discussing PI war memories. Encouraged her to draw images from childhood.
She produced 67 drawings of her grandmother's garden in Korea, each one showing different seasonal flowers.
Through these drawings, she began to speak, first naming the flowers in Korean, then describing their care, finally talking about her grandmother who taught her.
The garden became her bridge back to speech, to a self that existed before trauma. This individualized,
patient-centered approach
contrasted sharply with the Japanese military's
view of comfort women as interchangeable units requiring only basic maintenance. The comfort women's gradual acceptance of American kindness occurred through accumulated small gestures that defied their experiential paradigm.
When Private First Class Antonio Rodriguez spent his entire month's cigarette ration purchasing fabric so the women could make traditional clothing, they initially suspected an elaborate trap. Rodriguez, whose mother had been a seamstress in San Antonio, understood the psychological importance of clothing choice after years of forced costume. His platoon commander's report noted, Private Rodriguez procured approximately 200 yards of various fabrics through trade with local merchants. The liberated women spent 3 weeks creating garments, some traditional to their home cultures, others entirely invented.
The act of choosing fabric, designing clothes, and wearing self-made garments appeared to provide therapeutic value exceeding our medical interventions.
The Japanese soldiers who had staffed the comfort stations, when captured and interrogated, revealed the ideological framework that enabled their participation in systematic rape.
Sergeant Takeshi Yamamoto, captured in late,
testified, "We were told the comfort women were performing their patriotic duty, that they were volunteers who understood the importance of maintaining soldier morale.
When they cried, we were told it was from joy at serving the emperor. When they resisted, we were told it was modesty that required overcoming. The military created a language where rape became duty,
where victim became volunteer, where crime became service." This testimony,
corroborated by dozens of other captured personnel, revealed how totalitarian ideology could reconstruct reality to make atrocity appear virtuous. The chocolate bars, by November 1945, had evolved from suspicious gifts to currency to finally simple food. The first comfort woman to eat a chocolate bar publicly, a 17-year-old Chinese girl known in records as Ming, did so during a Christmas Eve celebration organized by the Red Cross.
Nurse Lieutenant Sarah Conway recorded the moment. Ming stood up during the carol singing,
unwrapped a chocolate bar that she'd been carrying for 4 months, and ate it slowly while tears streamed down her face.
She then walked to each of her fellow survivors and placed a small piece of chocolate in their mouths, like communion.
By the end, all 43 women in our ward were crying and eating chocolate, some for the first time since liberation. This collective consumption marked a psychological turning point.
Accepting sweetness as possible, pleasure as permissible. The American military's documentation of comfort women testimonies,
initially collected for war crimes prosecution, evolved into one of history's most comprehensive records of systematic sexual violence.
The 8 for 7-page report compiled by the Judge Advocate General's office included not just victim testimonies but also captured Japanese documents,
medical records, architectural plans of comfort stations,
and economic analyses of the system's operation. The report's conclusion stated, "The comfort women system represents industrialized sexual slavery unprecedented in scale and organization. It reflects the logical endpoint of an ideology that views humans as resources for state utilization, where individual dignity becomes subordinate to collective military objectives.
The system's efficiency in destroying human dignity equals its effectiveness as a tool of military oppression." The repatriation efforts for comfort women revealed another layer of American-Japanese ideological contrast.
While American authorities worked to return women to their home countries,
many discovered they had no homes to return to. Families had been told they were dead. Communities viewed them as contaminated, and governments preferred to forget their existence. The American response was to establish transition centers where women could remain as long as needed.
General MacArthur's headquarters allocated $2 million, approximately $30 million in today's currency, for comfort women rehabilitation programs.
This financial commitment, made while America was demobilizing and facing its own economic transition, reflected a moral calculation different from the Japanese military's cost-benefit analysis that had created the comfort women system. In January 1946, as repatriation began, many comfort women faced an impossible choice.
Kim Bok-dong, who would later become an advocate for comfort women recognition, recalled, "The Americans said we could go home. But what home?
My family thought I had died in a factory bombing.
If I returned, I would bring shame. If I stayed, I was nobody."
The American sergeant, he gave me another chocolate bar and said, "Sister, you take whatever time you need to decide.
This isn't a comfort station. Here you choose. The power to choose, absent for years, proved almost as traumatic as its absence had been. Several women required sedation when presented with options for repatriation. The anxiety of decision-making triggering panic attacks. The chocolate bar symbolic journey reached its culmination in an unexpected form. In March 1946, a group of 30 comfort women, who had chosen to remain in the Philippines, pulled their saved chocolate rations and attempted to purchase passage on a fishing boat to an island where they could establish their own community. When the boat captain learned their history, he refused their chocolate payment and offered free passage, saying his own daughter had been taken by the Japanese. This moment chocolate transformed from survival currency to
rejected payment to gift freely given, encapsulated the slow transformation of transactional survival into human community. The long-term psychological
studies of liberated comfort women, conducted by American military psychiatrists and later by civilian researchers,
revealed traumas enduring architecture.
Dr. Rosen's 5-year follow-up study, published in the American Journal of Psychiatry in 1950, documented persistent symptoms in 89% of subjects. Nightmares featuring Japanese military uniforms, inability to tolerate closed spaces reminiscent of comfort station rooms, and paradoxically, hoarding behaviors around American goods, particularly chocolate. One subject had accumulated over 300 chocolate bars, all unopened, stored in precise military formation under her bed.
When asked why, she replied, "They prove it ended.
The Japanese never gave chocolate.
As long as I have American chocolate, I know I'm free." The American soldiers who first encountered comfort women often carried that experience through their entire lives.
Staff Sergeant William Patterson, who helped liberate the Santo Tomas facility, wrote in a letter to his daughter 40 years later, I saw a lot in the war, honey. I saw men die, cities burn, children starve.
But those girls in the Philippines, what was done to them? It changed how I understood evil.
Not the hot evil of battle, but the cold evil of systems that turn people into things.
When we gave them chocolate and called them sister, we weren't just being kind.
We were insisting they were human, that they mattered, that what happened to them mattered. Every time I see a Hershey bar, I remember their faces when they finally believed us. The historical reckoning with the comfort women system remains incomplete. While American documentation efforts preserved crucial evidence, political considerations during the Cold War led to the suppression of many records.
The San Francisco Peace Treaty of 1951,
which formally ended the Pacific War, made no mention of comfort women,
prioritizing Japanese-American alliance against communism over full accounting of wartime atrocities.
Yet the chocolate bar testimony persisted in unexpected ways.
In 1991, when Kim Hak-san became the first comfort woman to publicly demand recognition from the Japanese government, she brought to her press conference a carefully preserved Hershey's wrapper from 1945, stating, "This chocolate wrapper is proof that once someone saw me as human. I keep it to remind myself that I am not what they made me."
But who the Americans called me sister, survivor, human. The comfort women's experience illuminates the ideological chasm between American and Japanese wartime worldviews. The Japanese system viewed women as resources to be requisitioned, managed, and discarded according to military utility. The American response, however imperfect and limited by its own prejudices and priorities, fundamentally recognized these women as victims deserving protection and dignity. This recognition, symbolized by chocolate bars freely given and the word sister spoken to women who had been systematically dehumanized,
represented more than individual kindness. It embodied democratic values that, however incompletely realized,
aspired to universal human dignity. The epilogue of this encounter extends beyond the war's end into present struggles for recognition and justice. The chocolate bar, that simple confection of sugar and cocoa, became a material link between the industrial democracy that produced it and the women whose humanity it helped restore. In Tokyo's Women's Active Museum on War and Peace, established in 2005, sits a glass case containing a single, unopened Hershey bar from 1945, donated by comfort woman survivor Yoon Tori. The accompanying placard reads, "This chocolate was given to me by an American soldier who called me sister. I never ate it because it was too precious. It proved that somewhere in the world, I was still family to someone. Even if that someone was a stranger who spoke a different language and came from a
country I'd never see." The American soldiers who liberated comfort
women and offered them chocolate were not saints or perfect exemplars of democratic virtue.
They were young men, many carrying their own traumas and prejudices, operating within a military system that had its own histories of violence and discrimination.
Yet in that moment of encounter, GI and comfort woman, chocolate bar extended between them. Something fundamental about human recognition occurred. The chocolate represented not just American abundance, but the possibility of kindness without transaction, gift without expectation, recognition without exploitation.
Today, as the last comfort women survivors pass away, their testimony is preserved in digital archives and museum collections.
The chocolate bar story might seem quaint, even trivial, against the enormity of their suffering.
Yet its very simplicity carries profound meaning. In a war that mechanized death and industrialized rape,
the chocolate bar given freely and received tentatively became a bridge between dehumanization and recognition.
Between viewing humans as utilities and seeing them as family.
The word sister, spoken by American soldiers to comfort women, was not policy but instinct, not strategy but sympathy,
not propaganda but recognition of shared humanity that transcended the boundaries of nation, race,
and trauma. The transformation from comfort woman to sister represents more than linguistic change. It embodies the confrontation between totalitarian reduction and democratic recognition,
between systems that consume humans and societies that, however imperfectly, aspire to preserve human dignity.
The chocolate bar, mass-produced in American factories by free workers, given freely to women enslaved by totalitarian militarism, became an artifact of ideological difference made material. In its sweetness lay the promise that suffering was not life's only flavor,
that abundance could be shared rather than hoarded, that even in its aftermath, humanity could be recovered one small gesture at a time. As the years passed and comfort women aged, Many reported that they could still taste that first chocolate, still feel its weight in their hands, still hear the word sister spoken in American accents.
These sensory memories became anchors to a moment when their humanity was recognized after years of negation. The chocolate bar, humble and mass-produced,
had become sacred through the context of its giving proof that even small gestures of recognition can begin to heal wounds that systems of oppression spent years creating.
In the end, the speechlessness of comfort women when called sisters was not just surprise, but recognition that they were being seen as they had always been beneath the layers of systematic dehumanization.
Someone's daughter, someone's sister.
Someone worthy of kindness, dignity, and the simple sweetness of chocolate freely given. This encounter between American liberators and comfort women, mediated by chocolate bars and the word sister, reveals fundamental truths about freedom and human dignity. Freedom is not merely the absence of oppression, but the presence of recognition.
Dignity is not granted by systems, but recognized by individuals who choose to see humanity where ideology has imposed utility.
The chocolate bar, in its journey from American factory to Philippine liberation camp to treasured memento, traces the arc of democratic abundance meeting totalitarian scarcity, of industrial might directed toward human kindness rather than systematic cruelty.
In calling traumatized women sisters, American soldiers unconsciously articulated democracy's aspiration that all humans belong to the family of humanity, that recognition of human dignity transcends the boundaries of nation and race, that even in was ruins,
the sweetness of human kindness can begin to restore what systematic evil sought to destroy.